So we begin. Our challenge letters this morning are Nora Bailey and Vivian and Ella Mark.
Our opening words are taken from a recent speech by Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres. Despite the odds and obstacles, we will never give up. Human rights are being violated in so many places, but we don't give up. because we know that the respect for human rights and human dignity is a basic condition of peace. Conflicts are multiplying, people are suffering, but we don't give up, because we know every man, woman, and child deserves a life of peace. Climate change is moving faster than we are, but we don't give up, because we know that climate action is the only path. Let us reaffirm our commitment to repair broken trusts, to heal our planet, to leave no one behind, and uphold dignity for one and all.
Well, with that, would you rise and join together in our unison affirmation? Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. El amor es el espíritu de esta iglesia, y el servicio es su ley. Este es nuestro gran pacto. Viva juntos en paz, busca la verdad en el amor, y ayudarnos los unos a los otros. You can be seated. Well, in the words of our senior minister who's on sabbatical, it's not like this every Sunday. My name is Jerry Ross. About 15 minutes ago, I received a call from our minister Annie Gonzalez-Milliken, that her car is broke down on Interstate 95. So she will not be here this morning, so instead you have me. Fortunately, we also have guest presenters this morning who will do the yeoman's amount of work here, and I'm pleased to begin by introducing them, and then I have a couple announcements. Today is UN Sunday, which is declared every year by the UUA to celebrate the work of our United Nations office at the our UU office at the United Nations, and of course the work of the United Nations itself. Pablo deVos-Deak has been raised UU at the Unitarian Society of New Haven in Connecticut. Pablo is currently serving on the UUA Board of Trustees as a youth trustee, has been youth dean for the UNO Intergenerational Spring Seminar for the past 2 years, and has helped facilitate UUJSC, Activate Now, and anti-racism programming at General Assembly. He is a high school senior and hopes to study social work in college next year. Joining him is his mom, Lurleen DeVos, is the chair of the Social Justice Council at the Unitarian Society of New Haven, the founder of USNH Kids Service Team, and has been a participant and presenter at the UNO Spring Seminar over the past 4 years. Also is P.J. Deak, Dad, is a member of the UNO Advisory Board and the UN Envoy Team at USNH. And you'll be hearing a lot more from them in a few moments. I do have a couple announcements. Announcement number 1, it's haunted house time. As you likely know, this is a fantastic, multi-generational, creative event that raises funds for our church and is a ton of fun. It's also a ton of work. We're so grateful to everyone making the haunted house happen, and we appreciate everyone's patience as we shift our church activities a bit over the next week to make this wonderful event possible. And that will start after community hour today. Our second announcement. The 4th and 5th grade RE class is using a curriculum based on Harry Potter. As part of the class, they are doing projects to fight various problems known as Horcruxes. Their next project is to fight the illiteracy Horcrux by holding a book drive. They are asking for your donations of new and gently used books, no magazines, please, which will then be donated to an organization that supports at-risk youth. And we have another announcement.
Today at coffee hour, our RE class will be selling Save the Monarch butterfly kits.
Our time for all ages this morning, come on down, will be led by Pablo and Lurleen and PJ.
Can we take those two mics also, or those? We'll share this one. All right, good. So I think the kids and anyone else who feels like it are welcome to come up and sit in front. Come on up. You want to sit in the middle? All right, we're going to pass this back and forth. Come on, there's lots of room. And you were awesome singers. So our time for all ages is a story called Enemies, written by Reverend Christopher Busey from Knoxville, Tennessee, but we adapted it a little. We're going to pass the microphone back and forth because there's three characters, a narrator and a young woman and her advisor. Once there was a young Unitarian Universalist woman who was elected to be the president of an island nation. Imagine that. Some people thought that she would not know how to run a country because she was so young. But this young woman had attended the United Nations Office Intergenerational Spring Seminar every year when she was in high school, and she had learned how to be a powerful force for good in the world. One day, an adult advisor who was always looking for ways he could become more powerful tried to influence her by saying,
Madam President, the only people on our island are good people, but we must be aware of the people on the next island, for they are our enemies.
Our enemies? How terrible!
exclaimed the president. The advisor said,
Yes, it is terrible, for our little island will never be safe while we have enemies close by. I'm afraid we must do something about them.
You are quite right. Do you have any ideas?
asked the president. The advisor said,
I do indeed. Our army shall sail to their island with guns and swords and cannons. We should march onto their island and conquer or destroy them. We must get rid of our enemies.
The president was not so sure this was a good idea. She said,
Thank you for sharing your thoughts with me. Let me think about this overnight, and we can talk about it again tomorrow.
The next day, when the advisor returned to talk to the president, he was shocked to find her having tea with the president of the next island. The advisor was angry and shouted,
How can you sit there and drink tea with that person? They are our enemy. We must get rid of our enemies.
The young woman president, who had learned how to be a leader at the United Nations Office Intergenerational Spring Seminar 4 years in a row, looked her advisor in the eyes calmly and steadily and said,
Oh, you are definitely right. We do have to get rid of our enemies, but not by conquering them with an army. Mr. Advisor, the best way to get rid of your enemies is to make them your friends.
Okay, as our youth and children leave for their RE class, will people join in singing hymn number 1018 in the teal hymnal, Come and Go With Me? words to our next hymn are in the order of service, and it is Build a Longer Table. Be seated. Pablo and PJ.
Good morning. We are under attack. On the internet, there's something called a distributed denial of service attack, in which the attackers bombard a system with a massive amount of information, a massive number of data requests for the system to process. Unable to process or respond to the huge spike in incoming information, a computer system, or even a whole network of computer systems, finds itself overwhelmed and will just shut down and become inoperable. And that's the whole goal of the attack, to shut the system down so it can't function. I was reading a study from a Washington think tank recently which made the argument that the citizens of America and other Western democracies are currently experiencing a, quote, distributed denial of truth attack. Through our news and social media networks, we're being flooded with huge volumes of information and disinformation every day. And the goal of that flood of information, the study argues, is not actually to inform us about anything or convince us of anything, but instead its intent is just to overwhelm us, and specifically, the study argued, to cause us to give up on democracy and walk away from the work of justice, to shut down just like a computer system would shut down when confronted with too much information. And the study continues, quote, it only takes a selectively small percent of disaffected individuals to have a very destabilizing effect on a democratic society. So when we're bombarded every day with a flood of information too big and too confusing to process, and that incoming information is actively intended to cause us to shut down and give up on working to create a more peaceful, fair, and free world, how do we stay together, side with love, and build a better world?
Ibu Patel, the founder of the Interfaith Youth Corps in Chicago, writes, the conventional wisdom is that young people are scrambling for their place in the world, but young people need more than just a place. A place is too passive. It's not a place young people need so much as a role, an opportunity to be powerful, a chance to shape the world, a role that will nudge them in the direction of leadership. Ibu Patel continues by saying, influences matter, programs count, mentors make differences, institutions leave their mark. When we look back in the lives of young religious terrorists, we find a web of individuals and organizations that shaped them. These young killers are not the most part for the most part, dramatically deranged individuals. They are kids who fell into murderously manipulative hands. So what is the antidote for the attack, which is designed to make you want to give up your values and your community, especially if you are a young person who's taking cues from the world around you about how to act, who you can become, and what role you play in this world? My name is Pablo deVos-Deak. I'm 17 years old, and I can tell you one thing that inspires us young people to not give up, one thing that nudges youth in the direction of leadership, one thing that gives young people a role in shaping our worlds is the Unitarian Universalist United Nations Office Intergenerational Spring Seminar. The opposite of allowing our kids to be overwhelmed, give up, walk away, is being a religion which opens the doors to things like the United Nations. Being a religion which mentors youth like me and finds real-world leaders to meet us and speak directly to us and motivate us to take action and create a world which, as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says, recognizes that the inherent dignity and equal rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace. That is the UUISm and its Intergenerational Spring Seminar. I can say that not only because I've attended the seminar for the past 4 years, but because I've been a member of the planning committee for the seminar, first in a role as junior dean and then senior. With the support of mentoring from adults, youth are the ones who plan and carry out the events. We, the young people, are invited into the United Nations headquarters, not as tourists, not as visitors, not on school trips, but as leaders from our denomination. We participate in presentations and workshops that we have organized featuring activists in the world who are working with the UN for a peaceful, sustainable world. And we are not just the audience at the Spring Seminar, we are also the speakers. I was a speaker about refugee and forced migration 2 years ago. My mom and I gave a presentation about the work kids as young as first grade have done in our congregation to work with refugee families, and how the kids in our congregation are mentored in this work by the adults. And for those youth who are not presenters, the UUISm Spring Seminar is still an interactive experience where everyone has a voice. During the seminar, there are affinity groups and intergenerational discussion groups where we all have an opportunity to talk, to share, to process things that we learn together. And at the end of the seminar, we participate in drafting a statement of conscience about how we understand the world, what our role is in the world, and how we plan to take action. The UUISm Spring Seminar is not just a place, it's an event, and it connects young people to the United Nations and to each other as a supportive community, and it helps us to see the powerful force we can be in the world.
Right from the start, the United Nations was created with the goal not just of bringing governmental entities together, but also to bring together non-governmental entities, NGOs, or to have an active and present voice in the discourse about how to create a sustainable world. One of those NGOs is the United Nations Office. The UUISm was founded in 1962 when Adlai Stevenson, who was the U.S. ambassador to the UN at the time and a Unitarian, suggested that UU congregations should create a national network to actively support the UN's mission to build a more peaceful world. Today, more than 200 congregations across the U.S. and Canada have envoys and youth envoys like you have here in Bedford. The executive director of the UUISm, Bruce Knotts, is a global powerhouse when it comes to activism. He has many leadership roles in the United Nations NGO community, such as being the chair of the Committee on Human Rights, chair of the Committee on Disarmament, Peace, and Security, a member of the Committee on Migration, just to name a few. In the past year, Bruce has been honored by the Irish Senate for his work around the world in LGBTQ rights, has led a delegation to the UN Environmental Summit at Katowice, Poland, and has made repeated trips to Taiwan to advocate for same-sex marriage, which recently was enacted as law there, partly through his advocacy. And the UUISm also operates social justice programs around the world. For example, in rural Ghana for AIDS orphans, particularly focused on providing educational opportunities for young girls. Through the work of the UUISm, our denomination has a small but powerful role on the world stage. You might wonder, with all of this work, how a small staff of 2 people plus volunteers has any time at all to run a seminar every April focused on bringing youth into the UN conversation about major global issues, or why they even bother with something like that. It happens because we know that Ibu Patel is absolutely right. Influences matter, programs count, mentors make a difference, institutions leave their mark. I've heard Bruce say that the spring seminar is one of the most important things the UUISM does for 2 reasons. 1, getting young people into the United Nations in conversation with world leaders to grapple with big issues is critical to helping them see themselves as actors in the world. And also, 2, that the seminar is organized and driven by youth. In fact, last year Bruce said to me, "The kids own this seminar. It's not mine, it's not my office's." Why is that important? Because Ibu Patel is also right that it's not a place young people need so much as a role, an opportunity to be powerful, a chance to shape their world. Every year since the UUISM was founded, there has been a youth-driven spring seminar. And as far as I know, we've only been banned from entering the UN once. We'd like to tell you a short story about that experience to illustrate the small but nonetheless significant role the seminar really does give our youth on the global stage.
In 2017, the subject of the seminar was disarmament. It was an outstanding opportunity to learn about nuclear weapons, drone strikes, and gun violence worldwide, and the need for us to take actions towards disarmament. But the 2017 UN Spring Seminar was more than just a learning opportunity. It was unexpectedly an opportunity for us to actually live the issue of nuclear disarmament in the moment. Normally, part of the spring seminar is held inside the United Nations headquarters, but that requires a United Nations member state to sponsor our group and the topic. In April of 2017, because we were addressing the issue of nuclear disarmament, all of the countries that might normally sponsor us refused. We assumed it was because they were concerned that bringing a liberal religious youth group into the UN to discuss nuclear disarmament would directly offend the newly elected Trump administration. We, a group of teenagers and young adults, were effectively banned from the UN because we cared about the threat of global nuclear destruction. We felt confused. We didn't understand why this was happening, but it was still an important topic to discuss. So the youth and adults leading the seminar created our own interfaith panel discussion outside of the UN.
We partnered with 2 Japanese Buddhist organizations, Riso Kosakai and Soko Gakkai International, with a representative from Palau, a nation which has suffered the negative effects of nuclear testing quite extensively, with the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, and with the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, or ICAN, which you may remember won the Nobel Peace Prize later that same year for their activism on nuclear disarmament. We held our own panel discussion featuring folks from these organizations at the Riso Kosakai Buddhist Center in Midtown New York, only blocks away from the UN. But we were still confused. Why couldn't we be invited into the United Nations? It was during our panel discussion at the Buddhist Center that we learned that our tiny group, about 100 youth and 50 adults, had become part of something much larger. The representative from ICAN shared with us that part of the reason no nation would sponsor us to be inside UN headquarters that week was that at the same time that our little disarmament conference was happening, 130 nations had, quote, turned the UN on its head. Delegates from 130 countries were meeting inside the UN at the same time as our spring seminar to craft an agreement to ban nuclear weapons. All of the nuclear powers had, of course, refused to participate. In fact, U.S. Ambassador at the time, Nikki Haley, was actually protesting in the hallway outside the room where the 130 nations were meeting. The representative from ICAN thanked our youth for holding our conference at the same time that a 130-nation nuclear disarmament meeting was happening inside the UN. She thanked our youth for supporting the cause of global nuclear disarmament at such an important moment. She said to us, quote, "Religious NGOs like the UUINO and Riso Kosakai can be a very strong force in the world, especially when they unite." She said she would make sure the folks inside knew we were here and that we were supporting them. Our youth were supporting them. So there we were. Just by creating a meeting of young people talking about disarmament, in a very small but nonetheless significant way, our youth were playing a role in global politics and pushing the world towards peace. Sometimes all it takes to be a player on the global stage is to be a bunch of teenagers who show up and insist on having a conversation about justice and morality with other people, even when you're locked out of the UN. This is the kind of opportunity that the UU United Nations office provides. I remember someone telling me years ago that the best way to get involved with the United Nations was just to show up and start working. At the time, I remember being totally puzzled because I was picturing myself as a suburban middle-class American walking up to the entrance of a refugee camp in some remote and war-torn part of the world where I had never been before and didn't speak the language, and saying to whoever happened to be standing there at the entrance, "Hi, I'm from America, I'm here to help." I was puzzled because I had totally the wrong picture. The place we can all volunteer with the UN and stay awake in the world and not give up on our values and shut down is right here at home, right here in our congregations. Your UN envoy team, Jerry and kids, your UN envoy team are doing that. They connect your congregation to the work of the UN. They connect your youth to something larger in the world where they have a place, a role, and a way to take action. So as you go out into the world today, realize that our denomination and our congregations and our youth are actively working towards the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all through the United Nations. Join us for the 2020 Spring Seminar in April, which will focus on climate justice. Who knows what will happen?
Thank you, Pablo and PJ. The only thing I would add briefly is sometimes when people talk to me about the UN and, why do we need it, my response is that, if we didn't have a UN today, we would have to invent one. Our global issues that we face can only be solved on a global basis, and the UN is what we have. And PJ and Pablo have described, I think so eloquently, the way in which our UU office at the United Nations lifts far above its weight. And we have been privileged here at this congregation to send some of our youth and adult sponsors to this intergenerational spring seminar over the last couple years. Once a month, we donate half of our Sunday offering to a recipient that's chosen by the Social Responsibility Council. And this month, the Council has chosen the Intergenerational Spring Seminar of the UU United Nations Office as the recipient. I hope you'll give generously. The offering will now be gratefully taken. Following our closing words and postlude, we hope people will join us for coffee, tea, and conversation in the common room. And then at 11:30, we will have a discussion with PJ and Lurleen up in the Bacon Room to hear a little bit more about the seminar, but also about some of the terrific work that the Unitarian Society of New Haven is doing in social justice areas. And our senior youth will join PJ over at Ken's. Pablo, excuse me. We have a closing hymn in the teal hymnal, number 1017, Building a New Way.
To quote again from Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, "From the climate crisis to job creation and conflict prevention, it's crucial that young people have a say in the decisions that are shaping their present and their future." Guterres continues, "My friends, there are no miracles. The only way for us to achieve our goals is to work as a team. Let us draw strength from the values of inclusion, tolerance, and mutual understanding that are at the heart of all major faiths and the United Nations Charter." Go in peace.